If anyone ever told me that I would be speaking at a state convention for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't think I ever would have believed them. I am truly blessed, and I am grateful to have been given an opportunity to do this. I want to thank the committee for asking me to speak, and my dear friends who brought me here today. It is an honor and a privilege to be a member of this program, and that's something I never thought that I would be able to say, because I never wanted to get sober. At the end of my drinking, I just wanted to die because that was my answer. I never thought that a life like this was possible for someone like me, and yet here I am. It's important to qualify, so I'll do that. My sobriety date is January 12th, 2001. I have a home group. It's the Aripeka Step in the Right Direction group in Aripeka, Florida. I have a sponsor, and I try to work the steps and apply them in my life today. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I used to go to a lot of speaker meetings. And I went for a couple of reasons. I went because I was petrified that somebody would call on me and ask me to speak in a meeting. And I knew for an hour I was safe. But I also went because it was important for me when I heard someone share their experience, their strength, and their hope, that they told me about who they were when they were drinking. Because it was impossible when I was new for me to believe that the person standing here ever felt the way I felt, had ever done the things that I did. They looked well, they looked clean, they looked put together, they looked happy. And I was dying. And so it was really important for me to be able to identify with who they were when they first came in here, because I was so hopeless. I was so helpless. So I think it's important to tell you a little bit about where I come from. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm 48 years old. I come from an Irish Catholic family. My mother's actually from Scotland. My father's Irish and German. And growing up, drinking was always a part of who we were. Coming from that type of cultural background, there was always drinking. If someone got married, you drank. If someone died, you drank. If there was a wedding, you drank. You just drank. That's what we did. So I always, even as a small child, associated drinking with something fun, something social, something friendly. I even remember, as a small child, tasting alcohol because my aunts and uncles would leave them on the table. And I don't recall ever liking it. I never was one who said I loved the taste of that. And to this day, I still don't like the taste of alcohol. I was truly a person who drank for effect. As a small child, I was painfully shy. I'm not just a little bit shy. I mean, so terribly uncomfortable in my skin. I used to hide behind my mother in the grocery store. I was petrified anybody would ever even talk to me. So long before I picked up a drink or a drug, I was a misfit. I never fit in. And what alcohol did for me was it made me feel normal. But I didn't know that at first. I just remained in this shy little shell of a life that I had. And I had friends, and I went to a little Catholic school, and my life wasn't terribly bad, and I didn't come from bad parents. But I was just always empty inside. I always felt like something was missing. I always felt like I wasn't pretty enough or good enough or anything enough. I just always was sad, and I was always blue. I don't ever remember being a happy child. I always remember just wishing I was someone else, looking like someone else, had someone else's hair. And I was an overweight child. I had bright red hair. I had a big gap in my teeth that you could drive a Volkswagen through. I mean, I was never the girl in school. I wasn't the cheerleader. I was just the girl, you know, and I just never felt good about Rose. I had two older brothers that I went to school with, and my brothers were everything in life that I wasn't. They were athletic, they were popular, they were smart, and it wasn't that I was dumb. I was just so incredibly shy I couldn't get out of my own way. You know, I wouldn't hand something in instead of, I was petrified it would be too good, or I was petrified it wouldn't be good enough. I was just always living in fear. And when I was 9 years old, my parents had another child. They had my little sister, Katie. And that changed my life drastically. I went from being the youngest child in my family and the only girl to being kind of lost in the sauce. I kind of just blended in with the background. I wasn't that special one anymore. You know, my little sister took my place, and I became very much of her caretaker. My mother and father are good, honest, hardworking people, and so I'd come home from school and I'd have to care for a little baby because my mom had to work. I'd have to do my homework and start dinner. So I was an old woman before I even hit 10 years old. I mean, I'm not even in double digits, and I got a baby on my hip, and I'm cooking dinner and trying to do my math homework. So I was always older than I was. But I didn't have a bad life. Alcoholism does run in my family. But I can't blame it on anybody or anything. It was a choice that I made freely and purposefully. I don't say, well, I'm this way or this happened to me because of. I'm really clear, and I always have been, that the reason my life turned out the way it did was because of the choices that I made. I never blamed anybody else, and it's not because I'm a genius. I just always blame myself for everything, you know? I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I didn't finish it. I didn't do a good job. I just always was blue and sad. My life started to change a little bit when I went to high school. I followed again my brothers to high school, and I went to Catholic high school as well. And I'd made a decision when I became a freshman in high school that I was gonna find an identity. I was tired of being Johnny and Tommy's little sister. I was gonna fit in, come hell or high water. I was gonna do whatever it took for somebody to notice me. Nobody ever noticed me. So I remember going to my first high school dance, and I remember asking my oldest brother Tommy if he would buy me beer before this dance. And he said, Rose, I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, why? That's what you do. That's what everybody does. And I bugged him like little sisters do, and I made his life just a nightmare until he gave in, and he finally bought me that 6-pack of beer. And I remember it as if it was yesterday. I remember drinking 3 Rheingold tall boy beers. And what I remember most is when I drank those beers, my whole perception of every single thing in my life changed. I wasn't too fat anymore, not pretty enough anymore, or not smart enough, or not popular enough. I felt normal. I felt normal. And I knew from that very moment in time that I'd found my answer, I'd found my solution. It was nothing like I started out just having a couple of beers. Every single time I had an opportunity from the age of 14 years old to drink, I drank. And I didn't drink to cop a little buzz, I drank to get drunk. I'd found the answer. I'd found the very thing that made living in my skin bearable. I remember many times as a teenager contemplating suicide. And I think if it wasn't for my alcoholism, I probably would have. I think my alcoholism kept all those feelings that I had at bay. They quieted the beast that was inside of me, and in many ways saved my life. I never drank successfully from the very first time. I drank alcoholically, like I said, from the beginning. And then there were signs, you know, I'm just not a good drinker. By the time I was 15, I had my very first of many bouts of alcohol poisoning, had to be rushed to the hospital. By the time I was 16, I was going to bars every single day after school. Going to the bars. School books, you know, in the car, going in the bar. And I didn't have ID, but gosh, if you know the bartender and you keep going there enough, they just assume you're old enough. And I always looked older than I was. So I got away with it. By the time I was 17 years old, my father sat me down and he said, Rose, you have all the earmarks of being an alcoholic. And I knew it. I knew my father was right. I knew it was different for me. I knew I drank differently than my friends. I knew it was too important to me. They'd go out and worry about getting a case of beer. I had to get a case of beer and worry about the bottle that I had secretly stashed in my pocketbook because, God forbid, I had to share with anybody. I was always different, and I knew my dad was right. But I also knew that it didn't matter because at 17 years old, I had all the answers. I knew everything about everything. But I was absolutely certain of several things. I was certain that it was my life, and I was going to live it any way that I wanted to. And I was truly under the belief that I wasn't hurting anybody. I truly believed that my actions didn't cause consequences for anybody else. And I believed that for a very long time. I believed it actually even into sobriety until I started to do some work and saw how my choices, my words, my actions, my attitude affects the people around me. So as much as I knew the old man might have a point, it wasn't going to change what I was going to do, and I was probably figured I just got to be a little sneakier about this. Got to be a little quieter about this. And I started doing a lot of closet drinking. By the time I graduated high school, and I always got good grades because my parents would have killed me. I mean, there was that fear. There was that parental fear in my house. I got out and I figured, well, I better go to college because that's what you're supposed to do. And I did. I started a county college locally to where I lived. And about 2 months in, I realized it wasn't for me. I didn't realize at the time that this was the beginning of how I started to sell myself short. About how I traded my life, my hopes, my dreams, my goals for a drink. But I didn't see that then. I figured, you know what? I don't really like this gig. I'd rather go out to the bars. I want to play pool. I want to dance. By the way, I never played pool, and I never danced. I thought I did until a lot of the fog started to clear up, and I realized when I held a pool stick in my hand sober, I'd never done this before. But this was my thinking. You know, I'll go out, I'll earn a living, I'll make money, and I'm smart enough, I'm good enough. And I did. I started to go out and I started to work. And I loved working. Because as much as I think as an alcoholic that I am, I'm a workaholic. Whatever I do, I put 2,000% into. You know, although there's a lot of unfinished projects I may start, but certain things like working, I threw everything into it because it became my identity. Because I had no other life outside of my work. My work defined who I was. So I was very good at it. And I liked money. I loved money. A very materialistic person. I love what money can buy. I love shoes and pocketbooks. I love earrings and perfume. And I realized when I went out and I started working, I could do all these things. And I was living at home, paying my parents $20 a week rent. So I was free to do all these things and to live lavishly and to go out every night. And I did this for a couple of years, and then I met the man of my dreams. He was the older brother of a kid I had gone to school with. And what attracted me to him was the fact that he drank exactly like I did. He didn't sip a drink at the bar. He drank. He just downed it right. And I was like, oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Because I don't like sissy little drinks. I don't like straws in my drinks. Please don't put any fruit mix in there. I like it hard and I like it straight. So I looked at this guy and I'm like, I could probably hang with him because I won't feel out of place when I'm with him. He's like me. And that was the come on. And so I started a 13-year relationship with a very sick alcoholic man that was toxic from the beginning. But when you're in the throes of your addiction, you truly believe you're in love. And so that's what I sold myself on that lie for a very long time. 2 years into our relationship, my parents and his parents got together and said, we need to break these two up because someone will die. And they were right. It was that sick. But we were in love. So nobody was going to break us up. So we were going to stay together in spite of everyone. We're an island. And the fact is, we never dated. We drank. We never went to the movies, never went out to dinner. We drank. That's the entire basis of the relationship that I had with this man. When I was 25 years old, still living at home, still paying $20 a week rent, my mother and father decided to move to Florida and throw me out on the street. And so I decided the only thing for me to do was to move with this man. That made sense. So as much as I was an alcoholic already, full-blown, blackout every time I drank, when I started living with him, I started drinking more than I'd ever drank before. Because I didn't have to worry about sneaking in at 3 in the morning. Was my father going to catch me? Did I have to drive? Didn't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. And I started drinking about 1.75 liters of whiskey every night. And working every single day. And I did a great job. I don't know how I got it, but I got it. And I don't know how I kept it, but I did. I worked for a very large Fortune 500 company, and I started out on the ground level, and I worked really hard, and I got raises, and I started making more money. And like I said, I was really dedicated to my job in many respects. As a sober woman, I can see where I really sold the company short, because I thought I was a great worker. But I really did work hard for a very long time. Well, as soon as I moved in with this man, he stopped working. And that's when I realized that I started to really just settle for anything in life. Good enough is good enough for Rose, you know? And soon after he retired from life, and we were living together, he started to become very abusive. He started to become very psychologically abusive, very verbally abusive. And eventually it led into some sexual abuse, and then it became a very physical abusive situation. And I was so sick myself, so sick, that I didn't realize that I could get out of this. I was so ashamed of what my life had become that I stayed in it for probably another 8 years, and it got progressively worse. He was a very sick